Good day, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the South African Accounting Academy, a warm welcome to the webinar on the CIPC Compliance Checklist. My name is Lettie Janse van Vuuren, and I will be your facilitator for the next 2 hours. Let's quickly just run through on the slides. There's a little bit more about me, my background and everything, for those of you that haven't come across me on the webinar circuit before. For those of you that are used to me, you'll well, hello again, should I say. And to everybody that's new today, I hope you join us in future so that we walk the walk on the compliance, the monthly compliance and legislation updates. All right, so let's move along. On the logistics slide, on the welcome slide, you'll see there that the webinar is supplemented by the slideshow presentation that you see, that you've already downloaded to your machines. Then we've got webinar material, which consists of 38 pages that is uploaded to your profile after the webinar, as well as source documents. And this one contains 2 bonus documents as well. So there's source documents and bonus documents. All of this is uploaded to your profile immediately after the webinar. So let me quickly go and show you what the webinar material looks like. I would like to take you to my other screen. There we go. Webinar material, you'll see there it is. And this is in a Word format that I do it. I do compile it into, I save it as a PDF so that your jumps all work. You'll see what the agenda looks like. The table of contents is very detailed. And this is exactly the order, and it follows the same order as the slides. Right, so it's quite easy to follow then. So we're going to start off with an introduction, looking at the notices issued, the compliance checklist itself, all the details surrounding that, then straight going into the bonus documents. Right. So you'll see in my webinar material everywhere where you'll see this, I call it a red lightning bolt thingy. Suppose it's a bit of a flash sign or whatever. But that's just to draw your attention to specific areas. Right. It is important to note that where you see this, I want to draw your eye there specifically. Then we've also got sections that I highlight in yellow. And that's also just to make it pop a little bit. And it's like making a summary of a summary. So whereas the slides are a very short summary, the webinar material contains more detail. It contains more detail, and then I think the webinar material is the center of everything. So from the webinar material, you can go to a lighter version, which is on the slides, or you can go to a more detailed version, which will be in your actual source documents. All right. So we've got all of that there. So let's get back to our source documents. Let me just wait and show you here. On the source documents here, you'll see I've given you, there's the notice that was issued. This is in your source documents. There are 4 source documents. I've decided to include the checklist that I've downloaded from the CIPC website, because you've got to be logged in to be able to get this. So I didn't know if all of you were able to do that, so I've done that for you. And then I've just got a checklist exactly the same as this one. It's just got some highlights on it. And this I do so that for my own purposes, so that my eye catches the main sections in pink and then the headings in blue. Because if somebody tells me section 15 of the Companies Act, I wouldn't know what that was. I would have to go and look it up. Section 30, I know. There are certain sections that you'll know off by heart. But certain sections, you'll never know them. All right, so this just helps a little bit with that. That's why they gave us this document. So those are the source documents, and then also I've given you bonus documents. There are 2 bonus documents that I've done for you. All right. So let's get back to the webinar material. Let's get back to the slides, actually. Back to the slides on the other screen, please. There we go. All right. Remember, all our training that we offer here at SAAA is recognized for CPD hours by the relevant professional bodies, because our policy is compliant with the IFACS IES 7. After the webinar, we will also be holding a 15 minutes Q&A time. You are also more than welcome to send through your questions that relate to the topic. Send through your questions as the webinar progresses, because I will be online live and I will be fielding the questions as you send them through. So what I'll do during the webinars, whatever Q&As I've got, I'll summarize them onto a sheet for you, and then we can work our way through that after the webinar. All right. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to always email those to info@accountingacademy.co.za. Just make sure that make sure that it gets to me. Make sure that you include CIPC checklist in your topic line, and then they'll know it's a question that relates to this that needs to come to me. Right. So if you can just do that, just for purposes of today's webinar as well, please try and stick to the topics of your questions. All right. We'd love to help you with all your questions, but our time is limited on these ad hoc webinars, and the time is dedicated to one topic. So let's try and stick to that today, please. Right. On the agenda, you'll see we're going to start with the introduction. We're going to start off with a base notice, where we heard about this for the first time, this checklist, what the effective date is. That's the most important. And then we're going to look at the actual compliance checklist, because you can't see it. It's not a document that you download from anywhere. It's a document that you complete online. So I've given you all this why, which companies have to comply, what happens if you lie. Let's look at some screenshots, look at the detailed content, how to fix something if you've submitted something incorrect, and who to phone, who's your phone a friend if you want to send an email. All right. And then under the bonus material, I've given you the most important one there, is this one highlighted in yellow called Compliance Checklist Working Paper. All right. So you are more than welcome. If you don't rate us after the webinar, you will be sent a link, and you can always provide us with some detailed feedback at that stage. But to questions, like I said, feel free to ask them during the webinar as well as afterwards. All right. So let's get started with the introduction. Let's start off with some of the functions of CIPC. I think it's important that we understand this, because the main function that CIPC has, in my mind, they have to monitor compliance with the Companies Act. But they do also have all of the other things on here on their plate. So you'll see there's quite a lot that they have to do. But the majority of things that we have to worry about, and why we worry about them monitoring us, is because it's to do with monitoring of the compliance with the Companies Act. So promotion of compliance with the relevant legislation, this is definitely one way to promote it. They've given us the checklist, and we have to complete it. We don't have a choice. We're going to have to do it. Right. It's like the IXBRL format of the statements. They gave us an option when it all started, and now there's a hard stop functionality. You can no longer submit any annual financials. You can't submit an annual return without first uploading your XBRL financials. All right. They also have to worry about efficient and effective enforcement of relevant legislation. So we know how many companies and CCs and whatnot there are in South Africa. How do they get to every single company to know which section of the Companies Act they are not complying with? It's a daunting task. So them having these checklists to gather information for them is a very powerful tool. And we then have to be very careful how we fill out those forms. Right, because they will monitor compliance. So we can't just go and say yes, 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 yes. Not that it's unethical in the first place, but it's also we are going to be recording information that is not true. Right. The best result is not to have everybody comply 100%. It's to also look at where nobody is able to comply. I mean, if you can put in there, are you able to submit your financials within 6 months? And everybody says no. I bet you that they're going to re-look at the 6 months. Because they'll say, hello, well, nobody's able to comply with this. And in the beginning, it was a bit of a shocker, seeing it in the audit report. Now it's like a standard. Yeah, you want to fall off your seat if somebody does actually submit their financials within 6 months from their financial year end. Right. So I've just highlighted those two for you. You're more than welcome to go through the rest in your material. The next slide shows us the organizational structure of CIPC. And the reason why I thought this was important is so that you could see how the different groups work together. We've obviously got the commissioner at the top. Then we've got governance, risk, and compliance. Now, governance, risk, and compliance, yes, definitely is the majority of the sections. Right. The majority of people work in this section. There's internal audit as well, and there's strategy, which all the business groups have. But if you have a look at it, they've got in here, there's corporate registers, enforcement and compliance, which is very important. Now, it's important also to note that we all have our people that we have as contact people there within these separate departments. And it's always so nice to know that I was simply able to send an email to the generic CIPC contact, the normal inquiries at CIPC. And I got such a specific and such a nice answer back from them. It's really heartwarming to know that their functions, their systems do work. All right. So this is just to help you with understanding where they fit in. Okay, it is much wider than that, because they've got sections in here called under patents, and there's creative industries as well. Right, there's all the information technologies, right? Business intelligence groups, there's corporate services, all of this, and then there's finance and procurement. All right. But like we said, risk, governance, and compliance, those would be the majority of the functions that go there. All right. So that's just to help you understand where this all fits in. Let's have a look at the CIPC notice that was issued. Right. So the CIPC notice that was issued, can I quickly show you what it looks like on my screen? Let me just find it. There we go. Right. You'll see that on my other screen, it says their notice 52 of 2019. And you'll notice here that it says notice of downtime, which I don't know where that actually comes from, because this was not a notice of any downtime. This was all about the company's compliance checklist that is available on e-services. Right. So just so that you know, and it does speak to this, I've summarized it on the slide for you, but look at that, it's short and sweet. Okay. Short and sweet, issued on the 13th of August. So that's exactly what the document looks like. It is available to you as a source document. Let's get back to my slides. And on the slide here, you will see it says there, CIPC have announced that a new user-friendly service has been added to e-services for customers to declare the compliance status of their company or companies to specific sections of the Companies Act as amended. So they're making it sound like this is something that you would want to do from your side, okay? The service can be accessed by choosing the Compliance Checklist button on the Transact page of e-services. The checklist can also be completed then by selecting the relevant buttons next to each question. So they're just explaining to you how you get on there. You choose the Compliance Checklist button, but you've got to be logged in first of all. You log into e-services, then you click on Transact, and then you click on the Compliance Checklist button. So then it asks questions, and you'll say yes, no, or not applicable. You'll have to select whichever. The rollout of the compliance checklist was on a voluntary basis for the 4-month period from the 1st of September. And that was to allow entities to familiarize themselves with the checklist. So this wasn't a rollout involving anybody specifically. They said that it's available on the e-services. Anybody can access this. From the 1st of January, you'll see I made it red, and it's quite big and bold. On 1 January, it will become mandatory for entities to complete the compliance checklist before submitting annual returns. Hello. Does this mean that you've got to say yes to everything? No. It just means that you've got to complete and submit your compliance checklist before you can actually then go forth and submit your annual return. But now my question is this. There's 28 detailed questions, very detailed. How do you know what to answer if you haven't done the work during your engagement? If there's no working paper, how do you know whether or not Section 90 was complied with? Hang on, what's Section 90 again? I don't know. Where do I find this again? Lettie, help. You've got to know where to go and find the sections to see what the detail is all about so that you can then go and answer yes, no, or not applicable. All right. Just so that you know, I've given you the full notice in the webinar material. I've pasted it into your material itself, and it's also available to you as a source document. So very important, the things that we take away from the notice itself is the very important date on 1 January, because it says it so nowhere else on the website does it say anything about 1 January. It's only in the notice. And I did speak to CIPC yesterday. I confirmed with Mr. Chetty that they will not be postponing this date. It is a date that is definitely there. So whether or not your period to submit your annual return is only in September or wherever the case may be, it doesn't matter. At that point in time, your compliance checklist will have to be completed. All right. So that's your notice 52. So very important there, this date, 1 January 2020. So looking at the compliance checklist, let's go and see what is this all about. So I've got to go back to the basics, unfortunately, so bear with me. What is the compliance checklist? It's a declaration on the compliance status of a company to specific sections of the Companies Act, of the company's regulations, and also to Schedule 1. It's also known as, aka, also known as Enforcement Compliance Checklist. There's one spot on the CIPC website where they refer to it as Enforcement Compliance Checklist. Right. So they've given us this checklist, and they are able to monitor compliance by doing what? They want to ensure compliance to the mandatory requirements of the Companies Act. The mandatory requirements of the Companies Act, they've decided what those are. And those are the 28 sections, right? One of them, for instance, is in section 15, requiring that every company must have an MOI. So do they have an MOI, yes or no? And what are the other details relating to that? This checklist also now serves as an educational tool for directors and company secretaries, and I should add in, and accountants and auditors and. I certainly learned a great deal as well in guiding them with regards to their responsibilities in terms of the Companies Act. I mean, let's face it, nobody knows all the sections of the Companies Act off by heart, all right? And if you do, well done. You're probably in the top like 2 percentile of the country. But what will CIPC do with this? They will use this checklist to regulate proper compliance with the Companies Act, and if there are trends of non-compliance, they will act accordingly. So if everybody does not comply with a section, the problem might be that the legislation is not sufficient, or too prescriptive, or too restrictive. So they will need to take corrective action, whatever that may be. It might just be that people are not, or companies and directors don't know what they must comply with, and that's why they don't comply. So then they will be slapped with issues, fines, penalties. They could be slapped with compliance notices, first of all. Compliance notice which says comply or else, right? And if they don't then comply, they've got like, I think, 40 days to comply with a compliance notice. And if they don't, the CIPC will then go to the court to get a court order, and they will then be ordered to pay penalties. And remember, your minimum admin penalty is 1 million rand. Minimum. Your maximum penalty is 10% of turnover. And in the legislated cases where CIPC have, during the course of last year, issued non-compliance compliance notices on 3 companies, it was based on the maximum penalty allowable, which was the 10% of turnover. Right. And I mean, that can put most companies in the bankrupt zone. Right. So very important. That's why we've got the checklist. Next, let's look at the categories of companies that must comply with a compliance checklist. We've got the first one, which is an Inc., right? An incorporated company. So the suffix there remember it ends with /21 or -21. Your normal limited company, Pty Limited, right, is an 07 company. Your limited or LTD company is an 06. State-owned companies ending with 30, and NPCs or non-profit companies ending with 08. And yes, all of these have to comply. Right. All of them. Now remember that a CC will fall in the same category here as the Pty Limited. Right. Because they have limited liability. So that's it. I've included full details for you in your webinar material, but those are the categories of companies that have to comply with this compliance checklist. What happens, I have to always ask this first of all. What happens now if there's any false declarations? If you do not answer each question truthfully, because the first vision I had when I saw this checklist being published, I knew what people were going to do. It's like doing phantom ticking, right? And everything is all neatly in a row. You don't even worry if it warrants a yes or no response. You just go, yes, 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 tick, 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 tick. And by doing so, you are not really answering truthfully. Well, you wouldn't even know because you're doing it so at the speed of light. You wouldn't even know, but you would know that you're not answering it in full detail, in the manner that you should, with the necessary attention to detail. So it's very, very important that the process is not one of phantom ticking and just saying, yes, 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 no, 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 not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. What are the consequences? In terms of Section 215, a person commits an offence if they knowingly provide false information to CIPC. So it is an offence in terms of the Companies Act. And you can then be convicted of an offence. If you are convicted in terms of that offence, you are then liable to a fine or to imprisonment, right? Imprisonment of up to 12 months or both. Compliance with these minimum specific sections does not constitute permission not to comply with the entire Companies Act or the schedules or the regulations. Right. So just bear that in mind. If you've got any permission to comply with less sections or specific sections, it doesn't mean that you don't have to comply with the entire Companies Act. Right. Those are in terms of false declarations. So, hello, what's the bottom line? No false declarations allowed, guys. Okay, none. Let's look at some screenshots of what the compliance checklist looks like. And for this, I would like to take you into e-services itself, because I want to take you to the system. So let's go. I'm going to log in. Let's go to my other screen. I hope you can see it. I can't make it much bigger than this, but I'm going to log into the system. This is me. My password, security code. And you've got to tick accept, and then you log in. Oh, no. Oh, grief. Look at this. Sorry, guys. Blonde moment. And you've always got to do all of this again. Ah, there we go. Right. So I am in. Let's go and see. Let's go and search for a company by enterprise number. Okay, give me 1 second. Can I ask you guys, let's just go back to my screenshots slide quickly. Let's get back to my screenshot slide. And you'll see where I am now is on the first step. I'm literally on the first step there. So I want to just quickly see what I've got here. Give me 1 second. I just want to find a customer number quickly. Right, let's get back to the CIPC website. So there's my enterprise number. And I then go and enter. Although I don't want to do a search, that's the one that I want. Okay. Enterprise number. Right. And there at the bottom, that's everything. Okay. So now I've already logged into my e-services. Now I merely go and I click on transact. And then right at the bottom here, you'll see there's a new little button there called compliance checklist. So I click on transact and then I click on compliance checklist. Once we've got the compliance checklist here, we have to go and worry about the enterprise number. Right. So the enterprise number, validate. So 344. Sorry. There we go. Right. Sorry, I got my numbers mixed up. What do they call it when you've got reversalitis, eh? It's your honest to goodness blonde moments. Right. So then there's the continue button. See, and here's where they call it an enforcement compliance checklist. So it's busy loading, and then it will take us to the screen. If you had a look on the slide, it said you've got to now go and enter the compliance year. While that's running, as joyously as it is, there we go. Here is your compliance year that says 2018. You can go 2018 or 2019, depending on which annual returns needed to be submitted. Normally, if it was, I think, going to be deregistered due to non-submission of annual return, you were allowed to then do both in 1 year. So you might find that you've got here 2018, and you'll see all the questions then say, did the company comply with Section 4 during the previous calendar year? Because even though we are now in 2019, we are looking at the compliance year being 2018. So it will tell you which ones you actually need to go and complete, the outstanding ones. So SA Accounting Academy, they've got 2018 and 2019 to deal with. Right. So that's the compliance year, the registration. And then you see this is the list. Did the company comply with Section 4, blah, 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 all these sections. Yes, no, not applicable. Yes, no, not applicable. And this is where I did not want you to go, yes, 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 tick, 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 tick. Right, it's here. Once you've done this, then you click on continue. Now, it won't allow me to continue because I have not selected any of the yeses and nos here. So all fields must be captured before you can click on continue here. So here's what I just wanted to show you. If you click on this little red button here, it says, click here to download PDF of all relevant sections, regulations, and schedules. This tells you what does Section 4 say? What does Section 15 say? Because my first question was, well, do I now have to go and summarize the Companies Act? Why can't they just tell me here? And I thought, well, I don't want them to tell me here with a tooltip because it'll probably disappear before I finish reading it. So for your convenience, that has already been downloaded for you. It is this document called checklist.pdf, and it is this document that you see. Okay. This one is just called Lettie's because it's pink and blue for no other reason. But here's where you can see solvency and liquidity test. Here we go. Right. Making sure that the assets fairly valued equal or exceed the liabilities. They will be able to pay their debts as they become due in the ordinary course of business. So what are we talking about here? We are talking about technical solvency as well as commercial solvency. Right. And in the ordinary course of business, that's normally for 12 months after the date. So normally for your going concern period. Right. If they had a distribution contemplated, also 12 months after paying that distribution, they should still be liquid. All right. And then they talk about all the other requirements here for Section 4. That's it. Unless the MOI provides otherwise, When they apply a test, right, this is their solvency and liquidity testing, they've got to do that. They would not include whatever. Yeah, that's it. I'm not going to sit here and read the requirements of the Act to you, but there's the next one, Section 15. Section 15, each company, each provision of a company's MOI must be consistent with this Act, is void if it's inconsistent with the Act. It may include certain provisions, but the bottom line is they've got to have an MOI. Right. When must it be filed? How must it be filed? How are the rules ratified and so forth? Okay. So yeah, your company's detail here, it's not just going to be, if you want to be able to click this as a yes, you can't just say yes. It's not just that, okay, yeah, they did. I'm sure they did. Yes, I know they did. You're going to have some form of work here. Now, whose responsibility is this? Is this your responsibility as the accountant and auditor? Or is this maybe the responsibility of management? Hello, what do we think? Whose responsibility is the annual return? The mere fact that we do these services on behalf of our client does not take away from the fact that it's their responsibility. We will gladly assist them with any service they want at, of course, our normal nominal fee. But that's what we've got to do. And if you think we don't even know what these sections mean, I think your clients know even less about what these sections mean. So bearing in mind that completing an annual return is no longer just you know what, it's going to take 5 minutes. Don't worry, we'll do all our annual returns like once a year, no problem. We'll crash the system like we've done in the past 10 years. Everybody will go on somewhere between 4 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock, because that's when it's the best time to actually go and submit annual returns. Right. They've zhushed up their systems, so we've also now got to go and zhush up our own systems. Communicate this with your client. For the accountants and auditors that perform an assurance or an audit engagement, it's quite easy. You should be assessing compliance with this. You should be able to get the answers yes, no, or not applicable when you complete your statutory audit section. Right. Same for independent review. Right? When you measure that, because remember, non-compliance with the Companies Act is what? It's non-compliance with the law and regulation. And if it's non-compliance with laws and regulations, we're sitting with no CLAR, which means as the accountant, as the independent reviewer, as the auditor, I might have additional obligations on me to report the no CLAR to whoever. If I'm doing an audit and it's a reportable irregularity, that no CLAR will be reported to IRBA. If it's an independent review and an RI, we will need to report it to CIPC. If I'm doing a compilation and I come upon non-compliance with laws and regulations, I will report it to management. And I will say to them, this is the first year we're picking it up. Put it into a report to management. Next year you fix it. Right. Now I know that you can't just go and say to your client, oh, you know what, I'm going to ask you another $5,000 this year because it took me much longer to do what I've been doing for the last 10 years for you. It's just now taking me longer. They don't understand why. You have to communicate to them. Listen, this is the checklist that CIPC now puts at my front door, and I need to complete this on your behalf. So first prize is you complete this checklist for me. I'll send you the list. All right, I'll send you the list in a Word format. You as the client, sir, ma'am, you completed yes, no, not applicable. There's the sections of the Act. Don't you know what they mean? Don't worry. There's a document called checklist.pdf. If you go to that document, it will tell you exactly what the sections mean, and you are then able to give me a yes, no, or not applicable next to each one of those items. I will then just merely go and click those when I submit your annual return. Think your client's going to fall for that? No. They're going to want you to do that. So yes, it is going to be an additional fee, but you need to communicate that to your client. Right. It can actually be quite a nice little practice expansion. Okay. This one, very important. If you have not yet downloaded, I've downloaded it for you already. In your actual material, under the screenshots, you'll see here, there's one of the screenshots, right? The one that we're looking at now. And I've given you that little red arrow and I've said checklist PDF is what you get when you click on that little red button there. Okay. So we've opened up the document. All we need to do now is we need to answer this truthfully. And we need to answer truthfully by merely looking at section 4, considering the regulations on number 4, going to your checklist.pdf, right? We can close down the notice now. Checklist.pdf, and if we're happy with all the requirements, we go back and we click on the yes. Might be enough for you if you're the client. And you carry on until you've done everything. So here's where I want to take you. I can't go past the screen, but you'll see exactly where this is coming from. Right. So going to the next screen. Let me make my material a lot bigger for you, so you can just see nicely. I'm hoping that's big enough. Whoops. Okay, that's way too big. Let's see. There we go. That'll do. There we go. Okay. 290%. So there's all the yeses and nos. That's a nice little screenshot. That's up to section 32. And then from section 33 all the way down to the sections, right? Section 94, Regulation 21, Regulation 43, and then complying with Schedule 1. Okay. And then there's another continue button. So these are, believe it or not, 28 questions. 28 questions, and after that, there's a little screen that looks like this. Once you've now done all of that, your screen will then look like this, and it says, one second, now I've gone too small again. What is it with me and my mouse control today? It then says, compliance checklist filed. Compliance checklist for the enterprise with the enterprise number has been filed. So your number will be there, and all you do at this stage is you can log out from here because it's done. All right. You log out and you've done it. What happens now if you did something incorrectly? How do you change this? Can you go back? No, because once it's been filed, it's gone. So we'll look at that process a little bit later. It's not up to the standards that SARS have yet, where you can keep the document open for the duration of a year. And you can go in and fill it in, and every time you log back in, you can just, complete it a little bit further. Complete another little bit, and then carry on and complete another little bit. Unfortunately, you can't. So with a CIPC document, you have to plan ahead. Right. So by planning ahead, this is what we mean. Those are our screenshots. If we're going to look at the detailed content now, let's get back to our slides, please. We've done all the screenshots here, and I've shown you the checklist.pdf. That's the 35-page document, and we've looked at the screenshots. Now let's go and have a look at the detailed content. This is where we've got reference to the sections of the Companies Act. So you are able to download this document. I've done it for you already. There's your checklist.pdf. And I said very briefly, let's run through the 35 pages. So let's go and run. Okay, feeling very energetic. Those are the 35 pages. How fast do we want to run? Okay. All the sections that are applicable, I've highlighted in blue. So you're going to have to do this every time you want to find something. Or what I've done for your convenience, I've done this little summary table for you of everything that you find in this checklist.pdf document. Okay. So checklist.pdf, what do we find in there? Here's where you'll see section 4. What does it deal with? Solvency and liquidity test. Section 15, MOI. Shareholder agreements, rules of the company. Section 28, accounting records. 29, financial statements. Right. So that's all I've done. This is the Companies Act sections, all the way down to number 94, which is Audit Committee. So the first 21 relate to Companies Act. 22 and 23 relate to the regulations, right? Companies regulations. And that's Regulation 21 and then Regulation 43. And then Schedule 1, instead of just being one question, they go here and they look at the 5 subsections of Schedule 1. Objects and policies all the way down to directors. So those are the 28 sections that you have. So if you want to know what on earth do they mean when they say Social and Ethics Committee? Regulation 43. Let's see if Lettie's system works. I know it's section 43. I want to answer the question now. I go to my checklist.pdf and I go to my section 43, which is, I don't know, whereabouts. Page 30. Hey, not bad. Okay. There we go. That was a fluke, guys. I did not practice that. Regulation 43 says, this regulation applies to every state-owned company, every listed public company, any other company that has in any 2 of the previous 5 years scored above 500 points in terms of Regulation 26.2. Regulation 26.2 is PI score. So if their PI score was above 500 in any 2 of the previous 5 years, right, then they must appoint a Social and Ethics Committee, unless they're a subsidiary of another company and that other company has the Social and Ethics Committee, or it's been exempted by the tribunal in terms of Section 72 of the Companies Act, right? Those are the only 2 things you can apply to the board, to the tribunal for an exemption. A board of company that is required to have a Social and Ethics Committee must do what? What must they have? All sorts. It must be incorporated. And then there's the company's Social and Ethics Committee, what the requirements are in terms of their functions, their composition, and so forth. Right. So it's really quite comprehensive here. So once you've done that, you can then say, okay, now, well, my client does not apply to them. They're not a state-owned, they're not listed public. Yes, they're a PTY limited or they're an Inc., but they have not in the previous 5 years scored more than 500 in 2 of those 5 years. So they don't have to. Right. They don't have to appoint the Social and Ethics Committee. So what do we do then? Well, then we just merely go back. We go back, we tick the box, and we move on. Right. So running through this checklist, I mean, you can sit and scroll yourself to sleep. But I think still it's easier. I like to work from like an index, and this is my index. So in your Word doc, in your webinar material, I've given you all the sections with what they actually mean. And the detail of that you'll find in your checklist document. So that's how to use it. I've given you a section here that says, how should you use this checklist.pdf? I've given you checklist.pdf available to you as a source document. How should you use this document? Well, you're going to now take it, and I suggest that you compile a working paper out of this. So what prevents you from having this as your first couple of columns and then add in the 3 columns, yes, no, not applicable? You can even add in your detail here if you want. It might just be a very long document, and I have done that for you, by the way, where I've combined the 2 so that you don't have to sit and go backwards and forwards, and your working paper is just one very long document. But at least you don't have to scroll backwards and forwards. If you maybe get to a stage where you start knowing the sections, yes, more than welcome to just use it like that. But this is what you need to do. You've got to have a working paper. If you are performing an audit or a review, I would suggest that it forms part of your working paper file. If you are just doing a compilation, you might want to do this as an agreed upon procedures, because this is extra value added to your client. Not only are you drafting their financial statements for them, which will be in XBRL format to upload so that you can upload and you can submit their annual return on their behalf, you can now also provide this little nifty service for them, right? What you charge will be probably based on time, but I can see that a lot of people are going to make a lot of money off this. So you don't want your clients going to other people. Get onto the bandwagon, get your letters out to your clients saying there's new legislation starting on the 1st of January. So go have a Merry Christmas, but when you come back, this is in force. So we'll have to make a plan. Somebody has to do this for you. So please allow me to do that. All right. So in order to truthfully answer each and every question that is set out in the checklist, you have to be completing every single thing in accordance with the requirements that are set out in the checklist.doc. Right. I don't care if it's an audit or an independent review or a compilation. If it's a compilation, you obviously don't have to do it. But then I would go and say, well, let's make it an agreed upon procedures. And then you follow that ISRS because it's a related service. Okay. Very important. The completed checklist must form part of your working papers. As the practitioner, that's in terms of your quality control standards. Okay. You can't, what do you back it up with? Right. It is an opportunity, I said there, it's an opportunity for you to expand your services that you provide to your client. And it will ensure that you can click on all the yes buttons with a clear conscience when the time comes to submit the client's annual return. And in fact, if it's done now, what prevents you from submitting it now? Absolutely nothing. Right. Let's move on to our 6th item now. And this is how to rectify incorrect information submitted. Let's get back to our slide. That was the detailed content. How do we rectify incorrect information? Well, if you did anything incorrectly, you are going to send a very nice email, a very explanatory email. You're going to send it to COR 135.1 complaints at CIPC. You're going to explain why incorrect information was submitted, why it should be rectified, and then CIPC will make the determination. So they will either unblock certain things to say, okay, now you can go and change it. Or if you tell them what the correct answer is, they might even change it to that. We don't know what they're going to do yet. All right. But they will make the determination on whether or not you will be allowed to rectify it. So my advice here is do not go in too early. Don't go in on the 2nd of January and someone go and yes on all of your clients. Please. Leave this until it's time for your annual return. Remember, you won't be able to submit your annual return without completing this checklist first. So it's just another little rung in the ladder. It's another step that you must perform before you can submit your annual return. That's all. It's like compiling your financial statements. Check. Uploading via XBRL. Check. Compliance checklist completed. Check, check. Annual fee paid. Check. Then you will be able to submit your annual return successfully. All right. So it's become much more clear, and it's also been, the processes involved are now much more, how do you say, separately identifiable. All right. But so this is what you do. You send that email, you say to CIPC, we apologize profusely. We did something incorrect. This is why the incorrect information was submitted, and this is why it should be rectified. Right. Lastly, if you have any queries or you require clarification on the checklist, nothing wrong with sending an email, and they have dedicated this email to this now, COR 135.1 complaints, and send the email, they will get back to you. Right. So that's quite nice to know that they've done that for you. So if I can quickly take you through to the bonus material. In the bonus material that I've done for you, I've given you 2 documents. The first one is a compliance checklist for your working papers. And I've given you a checklist.pdf in Word format. Now, the reason why I do it in Word format is because when you copy from PDF to Word, everything goes all wonky. So I've taken out all the wonky stuff. I've done the formatting. So it's very easy if you want to copy and paste it in from anywhere. All right. So I've done that for you. I will also, by the time that the webinar finishes, there will be a third document in your bonus document, and it will be called Detailed Working Paper. Let's call it, I don't know, Lettie's Detailed Compliance Checklist Working Paper. And what that will be is it will be my normal compliance checklist with all the requirements in it as one document. And that I would actually like to do as an Excel document, because on the Excel document there I can use drop-down boxes. I don't have to go and insert yes, no, or not applicable. I can physically do it in Excel, right? So I will commit myself to give you that document, right? By the time the webinar finishes, you'll be able to download it. It will be uploaded to your profiles, okay? So hopefully, well, let's say by the same time all the other webinar material gets uploaded. So that could be just later this afternoon, or give it till tomorrow morning. Let's go and see what it looks like in the material. In the webinar material, this is what the document looks like. Now, do you see it's exactly the same summary that I gave you of what's in your checklist.pdf document, but I've now added in 3 columns, yes, no, or not applicable. The problem is I still don't know what the solvency and liquidity test is. So all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take the section here of the checklist in PDF format, right? There's your solvency and liquidity test. I'm going to take all of this information that relates to the solvency and liquidity test, and I'm going to copy that into this table. Into this table, right? I'll give you the detailed info below. And that's what my final document is going to look like. Right, I think it's just it's a little added something, and you don't have to do too much with it. I don't mind giving you that. It's my gift to you for attending the webinar. All right. Solvency and liquidity, and that's it for each one of these. So I'm going to take the 35 pages, and I will be putting the detail where it needs to be. But now you've got a yes, no, and not applicable as well. Okay. Now you might have some yeses and some no's and some not applicables because the requirements are quite numerous. So that's why I said I will do this for you in an Excel document. All right. So that document will be worth its weight in gold, as is these 2. So the separate CIPC compliance checklist working paper, at this stage, this is your way of documenting what needs to be carried forward, because whatever's in here, whatever you capture in these 3 columns, that is what gets captured onto CIPC's website, onto the compliance checklist for whichever compliance year you will be busy with. Right. So that becomes very important. This will facilitate the gathering of information, and don't leave this until you submit your annual return. Listen very carefully. Don't leave it, because the completion of this checklist is not a 5-minute exercise. It's not a 5-day exercise either, but it's definitely not a 5-minute exercise. Right. And obviously you'll have to do a test run. So try and do one on your own company and see how long it takes you. Or try and use one of your clients as a guinea pig, so that you can see more or less how easy is it to answer these questions with the information that you've got. You might find that you might need to send your client a checklist for them to complete, because you can't answer on their behalf. You want to know certain things. So it might be like giving them a little checklist, which then forms part of your management representations that they make to you. All right. This is gathering of evidence, guys. Whether it's audit evidence or not, this is gathering evidence, or gathering the yeses or nos to be able to complete the compliance checklist. Right. So there's the working paper. And you'll see the working paper fits in very nicely on one page with the regulations as well as the schedule of provisions. Okay. I'll make them nice and small and they'll fit in. How do you use the working paper? Definitely. We've already spoken about that, so I've just reiterated to you. And here's your checklist.pdf in your MS Word format. Right, so that you can copy and paste to your heart's content. Let's get back to our slides. Both of these Word documents are available to you as a Word document, as bonus documents, and then I'll make sure that there's an Excel document in there as well. Right. If you guys have any questions, we are going to go into the live Q&A system now. So we will see what's potting in terms of the Q&A systems. But we have already been through the material. We've been through the slides. The questions that I got during the webinar, I'll be taking 5 minutes or so quickly just to get them summarized, and we can start discussing those. Right. So we're going to have this in preparation. If you have to rush off, no worries. You can just send your email queries to info@accountingacademy.co.za. Remember your subject line CIPC checklist. And also, if you have any other feedback or suggestions, believe it or not, this topic for this webinar came from a webinar that I presented last month. It actually came from my MCLU, and I said, maybe it's a good idea if we have a separate topic. And we got such an overwhelming response from people saying, yes, please, we need this webinar. So feel free. If you ask, how do they say? If you don't ask, you don't get. The worst we can say is no. So please feel free to ask if you want certain topics covered. Right. I think I can do almost anything on a webinar and present on any topic. So whatever you feel will blow back your hair, go for it. So we're going to go the question and answer route. I just need to quickly finalize the end, and then we can go back to the Q&A sessions. Remember that the webinars like this will be, if you guys are not yet subscribing to our CPD packages, there is a package called CPD for Chartered Accountants, where it's basically the monthly compliance and legislation update. If you use that and you want to add on other ad hoc webinars, nothing wrong with that. It's quite nice to know that as a subscriber, sometimes you receive these kind of webinars for free, right? Depending on whether or not we run a free session or not. If you want to become a member of MCLU, simply send an email to info@accountingacademy, and in your subject line said, just put in there, please contact me about MCLU. All right. So you know what, I've tried to get a laundry list together of all the topics that relate to accountants and auditors. And it's just too plentiful, and it's whatever is relevant. And you don't want to have those big choices up front. You do want it, yes, when we've got a CPD system that changes next year, we will be, in response to that, we'll have to change the way that we do CPD. All right. But at this stage, it's too much. Staying up to date is hard enough. So let me take that hassle out for you. So from my side, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for subscribing to the webinar today. Thank you for listening to me for the last hour or so on the recording. We're going to have the Q&A session, which is normally longer than 15 minutes anyway, and then we will be logging off. All right. So thank you for your patronage, and from me, Lettie Janse van Vuuren, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and goodbye.